Hello and welcome to the Rugby Roundup, September 12th, 2024. I'm Big Mike. Let's get talking rugby. As always, please, if you would like me to talk about any competitions or rugby games around the world here on the Roundup, let me know on my socials, on Instagram at Big Mike Sports NZ, and on the YouTube at Big Mike Sports. Awesome. I'd also like to take some time to say hello to my one listener in Germany, listening every week. Kia ora. Now let's get to the roundup. Starting with International Rugby first. In the Rugby Championship, 2 games were held on the weekend, and boy howdy did we get some interesting results. In Cape Town, the Springboks got over the All Blacks 18 points to 12, with the score being 9-3 to the All Blacks at half-time. New Zealand not scoring any tries in this one. Big difference would be, once again, the bench, how the bomb squad for the Springboks came on and took control of the game, and how some of the All Blacks bench or some of the substitutions made just didn't quite click. And the All Blacks fell off the gas against the world champion and number 1 team. My theory, which is not true, is that because if South Africa lost this game, Ireland would take their spot at the top of the world rugby rankings. New Zealand thought, no, we'd rather have our good friends the Springboks on top than the Irish. Haha, I kid. In Argentina, after leading 20 points to 3 at 30 minutes, Australia lost 67-27 against the Pumas. What happened to the Wallabies in this one? They started big, they started strong, and then it all turned to incredible custard. The Argentinians scoring 40 points in the second half to Australia's 7. Wow, not much more to say about this one. Even in the highlights, you could see how painful it was over 80 minutes for Australia. Big difference in this one. The score. In Pacific Nations Cup, after being up 19-0 against Tonga, Fiji got a horrific red card. The game became 19-all at the 37-minute mark, with Fiji running away, eventually being one man down 50-19 over Tonga and Nuku'alofa, meaning that Tonga finished 3rd in the Pacific Islands group in the Pacific Nations Cup. For the battle for first place in Group B, Japan defeated the USA in Japan. They were up 31-10 after 46 minutes, and then 13 minutes later it was 31-24, with the American Eagles coming back. But Japan. I get confused because of that wonderful victory Japan had in 2015, and that's where my brain just went. Japan beat the USA 41-24. What this means is that Japan comes first, USA comes second, and Canada comes third in Group B. In Women's International Rugby, the big game of the weekend, England, France, 38-19. It wasn't as close as I thought it was. It's the only game in my big 3 predictions from last week not to be nice and tight. But England got away and were 19-0 up at half-time. France played better in the second half, but at that point England had already won the game. In other international results, on the women's side, Scotland defeated Wales 40-14, and South Africa beat the Barbarians 59-17. Oh, sorry. Now to the domestic game in New Zealand, NPC action. Great Ranfurly Shield game, one of the great challenges I've ever seen. Tasman getting over Hawke's Bay 25-24. Tasman were up big, but Hawke's Bay came back to be leading 24-22, then gave away a penalty 48 metres out. The backup first 5 said, I'll take this, and Tasman won by a point. This was Tasman's first ever victory for the Ranfurly Shield. But next week they've got a big game against Wellington, who is the other unbeaten team in the competition. Speaking of our teams that haven't won or hadn't won going into the round, Auckland got their first victory over Harbour in wet ball gate. Big halfback miscommunication in that one led to an Auckland last-minute try to take the victory, and Manawatu could not get the victory over Bay of Plenty, losing a close one, 68-14. In Farapama Cup action, Taranaki, Tasman, the battle for the wooden spoon. Two teams who had not won a game, Tasman winning this one 39-36. First place in the Premiership, Counties Manukau beat Auckland 35-20. First place in the Championship, Manawatu beat Harbour 31-0. The Championship goes to the semi-finals this week with 2 more rounds left in the Premiership. In the last round of the regular season of the Currie Cup, the Cheetahs, Golden Lions and Griquas got victories, as well as the Sharks, who beat the Bulls, who they will face this week one more time in the semi-finals. In top 14 action, defending champions Toulouse beat newbies Varm 43-18. La Rochelle beat Toulon 19-15. Bordeaux got a good victory over Stade Francais 46-26. In an Owen Farrell's debut for Racing 92, they lost to Castellas. And that's it for our roundup this week. Now, the fun fact, we're going to speak about women's rugby here. For those of you that don't know, the Women's Rugby World Cup has been going since 1991. And in that time, England and New Zealand have taken their share of the spoils, except for the inaugural World Cup in 91, which went to the USA. Now let's preview this week in rugby. In women's internationals, the big one at Twickenham, or Allianz Stadium, formerly Twickenham. Don't get me into that. First ranked domination squad England are taking on second ranked world champions New Zealand. This one's gonna be big. Set your alarms if you're not a late cat. Man, this one's going to be phenomenal. It's going to give us a really good indication of where these two teams are leading into the World XV and also into next year's Rugby World Cup, where the final is going to also be at Twickenham. Also in women's international games, we've got the 8th ranked Italy taking on 11th ranked Japan, 9th ranked Ireland taking on the 5th ranked Australia, who did not qualify for WXV1 and will be going to South Africa for WXV2. 6th ranked Scotland, who got a victory last week, taking on the 14th ranked Fiji, and the 18th ranked Samoa going up against Australia. Things are getting juicy in the Pacific Nations Cup, with all 6 teams travelling to Japan this week. In the 5th place playoff, it will be Tonga versus Canada. Canada has had a victory over Romania this year. Tonga has failed in every international they've had. This one is going to be interesting. In the semi-finals, you have Fiji taking on the USA. Fiji have looked dominant despite most of their players being locked into French rugby contracts and not playing, so it essentially being the Drua versus the USA this week. And Japan taking on Samoa. That is a game we cannot pick. We don't know what Japan's going to be up to. They've had a couple of victories against Canada and the USA, but will they be able to match the strength and power of Samoa? Now to the domestics. In the Air New Zealand, in the Bunnings New Zealand NPC, my apologies, 12 fringe All Blacks, or not fringe, 12 All Blacks that did not play last week will be returning to their provincial teams for this week's games, which is exciting. In Ranfurly Shield action, Tasman's first defence is against Wellington. 2 unbeaten teams fighting for the Ranfurly Shield. Also, other top 6 teams, Bay of Plenty, will be playing Taranaki, and Waikato will be playing Hawke's Bay. 3 absolutely great games to look forward to. On the other end of the table, Manawatu, who have not had a victory, will be taking on North Harbour, who have had so many close losses, in the last few minutes, and will be looking for that killer blow against Manawatu. Can they do it? Who knows? In the Farapama Cup, the championship semis are on as Manawatu takes on Harbour. and Wellington take on Otago. There are 2 more rounds in the Premiership, with a big game this week being first place Counties Manukau taking on second place Waikato. In Currie Cup semi-finals, as I said earlier, the Bulls, who have had 7 wins, 2 losses and a draw, will be taking on the Sharks, who have had 6 wins, 3 losses and a draw. And the 9-1 Golden Lions take on the Cheetahs in the other semi-final, the Cheetahs having just won 5 games out of their 10 this year. Over in the top 14 in France, the 2 big dogs, Toulouse, defending European champions, take on La Rochelle, who are led at number 10 by New Zealander Ehire West, fun fact. Another big game, unbeaten squads Lyon and Bordeaux take on each other this weekend. Now for our Rugby Roundup Big 3. If you've only got time to watch one rugby game this weekend, please make sure it's one of these ones. We have England versus New Zealand at Twickenham, Tasman versus Wellington in the NPC for the Ranfurly Shield. And this was a tough one. I thought maybe Japan Samoa. I thought potentially Toulouse La Rochelle. But my third game in my Big 3 is the Currie Cup semi-final between the Bulls and the Sharks. Next week on the Roundup, we'll be previewing the last 2 rounds of the Rugby Championship as New Zealand and Australia compete for the wooden spoon, and Argentina try and cause some big upsets to potentially take the championship out of South Africa's hands. Also, in England, the Premiership begins next week, and in the rest of the countries, the URC begins, so we'll get a couple of previews, look at who's the favourites going into these competitions. But for now, thank you for listening to Big Mike Sports here at the Rugby Roundup, and as always, have a beautiful week and watch some beautiful rugby.